Most people think the ultimate response to being undervalued is a loud, chaotic argument with others. But the true master of power knows that the loudest noise is complete, chilling, and absolute silence. What if your sudden disappearance was more painful than your presence ever was to those around you? We often value what is gone far more than the things right in front of us today. While anger is a fire that eventually burns out, absence is a cold void that never stops. The cruelest punishment for being taken for granted is the total removal of your very existence. Strategic absence is not merely walking away. It is a calculated and potent form of psychological power. When you become a fixed variable in someone's life, they stop seeing your value and your worth. They rely on your presence as part of their daily psychological infrastructure without ever giving it thought. By removing yourself, you dismantle the very foundation of how they perceive their own reality and world. This sudden void triggers what Machiavelli described as the necessary distance for maintaining true authority and respect. Without you there to anchor them, the person who neglected you enters a state of intrusive recall. They are forced to replay every memory, searching for the moment they lost control of the situation. This mental haunting leads directly into a revaluation crisis where your worth is finally and fully realized. The silence forces them back into the mirror stage, facing a reflection they no longer recognize alone. Your absence becomes a haunting presence that demands answers they are no longer equipped to find themselves. They begin to realize that you were the invisible force holding their fragile sense of self together. When the person who was always there vanishes, the neglected party finds themselves in total emotional collapse. This is the architecture of power, where silence speaks louder than any scream ever could hope to. To understand why silence is a weapon, we must look at the architects of power itself. Niccolo Machiavelli, the master of political strategy, understood a secret that most modern relationships ignore. He realized that true power isn't about what you give, but about what you take away. This isn't just a modern tactic. It is an ancient principle of the psychological battlefield. Is your constant availability actually the reason you are being ignored by those you love? Machiavelli believed that influence is rooted in what is withheld rather than what is present. If you are always there, how can they ever truly feel the heavy weight of your worth? Power is built on strategic absence, creating a vacuum that others are forced to fill. When you remain accessible at all times, you become a fixed variable in their psychological infrastructure. A fixed variable is easily ignored because it is predictable and requires no effort to maintain. To change the dynamic, you must break the pattern and introduce the concept of strategic absence. Machiavelli observed that presence diminishes fame, while distance and silence actually increase a person's perceived value. Consider the sun. It is only appreciated because it sets and leaves the world in darkness. Eternal light would eventually become an annoyance, losing the beauty found in the cycle of disappearance. When you master the art of vanishing, you suddenly gain control over the entire psychological battlefield. Leaving without looking back forces the other person into a state known as the mirror stage. In this stage, they are confronted with their own actions and the reality of your absence. Your departure creates a revaluation crisis, making them question why they ever took you for granted. They begin to experience intrusive recall, where memories of you flood their mind in your absence. This mental haunting is far more powerful than any argument you could ever hope to win. By withholding your presence, you transform from a background detail into a dominant and haunting force. Power lies in the ability to walk away and remain a mystery to those who once knew you. Machiavelli taught that a leader is most respected when their next move remains entirely unseen and unknown. Silence acts as the architecture of authority, building a foundation that presence alone can never achieve. You must learn that being a constant source of comfort often leads to being treated as disposable. True authority is established when your presence is treated as a privilege rather than a guaranteed right. By stepping back, you force them to realize that your value was never something they truly owned. This psychological shift moves the balance of power from the one staying to the one who leaves. But when you apply these principles, you trigger a sequence of events most people are unprepared for. Most people instinctively reach for words when they feel their value beginning to slip away. They believe a heated confrontation will finally force the other person to see their worth clearly. But Machiavelli understood that raw aggression is rarely the most effective tool in any power dynamic. He taught that true strategy requires a cold, calculated distance rather than a chaotic emotional outburst. When you confront someone, you unknowingly hand them the very keys to their own psychological escape. Your spoken grievances provide them an easy opportunity to dismiss your valid concerns as mere emotional instability. Every explanation you demand gives them the chance to justify their neglect with a clever, polished excuse. By engaging in the argument, you reinforce your role as a predictable element within their daily life. You remain a fixed variable, a constant presence they can manage, while continuing to undervalue your spirit. To truly change the dynamic, you must dismantle the psychological infrastructure they have built around your presence. This shift begins when you replace the noise of conflict with the devastating power of strategic absence. Unlike in arguments, silence offers them no ground to stand on and no narrative to rewrite. You stop being the mirror reflecting their ego and start becoming a void they cannot easily fill. During the mirror stage of this collapse, they are forced to face their own reflection without you. Without your constant feedback, their sense of control begins to fracture under the weight of the unknown. This sudden void triggers a revaluation crisis, forcing them to weigh the true cost of your disappearance. They begin to realize that the person they took for granted was actually their emotional foundation. As the days pass in silence, your ghost begins to haunt the quiet corners of their mind. This marks the onset of intrusive recall, where memories of you surface without warning or their permission. Every room they enter becomes a reminder of the silence you have left in your wake. They search for a justification to move on, but your absence provides no closure to grab onto. The efficiency of vanishing lies in its absolute refusal to participate in their defensive games or lies. While confrontation gives them a target, strategic absence leaves them swinging at shadows in the dark. You are no longer the one begging for attention. You are the mystery they cannot solve. By stepping away completely, you reclaim the power that was slowly drained by their repeated neglect. This is not an act of cruelty, but a masterclass in establishing your own psychological boundaries. Now, let's map the descent into the void, tracing the architecture of a total emotional collapse. There are 7 precise stages of psychological torment that occur when you choose strategic absence. Most people never reach the final stage, because the 7th is the one that breaks them permanently. Think of your presence as the foundation of another person's complex psychological infrastructure. Removing yourself is like pulling the bottom floor from a fragile mental house of cards. Machiavelli understood that power lies in becoming a fixed variable within another person's reality. When that fixed variable vanishes, the victim's internal world begins a rapid, uncontrolled descent. How much pressure can the human mind take before it starts to rewrite its own reality? The initial disappearance triggers a seismic shift, forcing an immediate and painful revaluation crisis. Soon, memories flood the mind through intrusive recall, turning every past interaction into a haunting ghost. They enter the mirror stage, desperately searching for their own value reflected in your missing gaze. Without your validation, the very pillars of their self-worth begin to crack under the silence. Silence isn't just empty space. It is a heavy weight pressing against their need for certainty. As each stage unfolds, the person you left behind loses another piece of their mental stability. They move through confusion and desperation, frantically trying to bridge the gap your absence created. This is the ruthless efficiency of strategic absence, dismantling their ego without uttering a single word. The erosion is slow at first, a subtle leak in the dam of their emotional security. By the 6th stage, the facade of strength has completely crumbled, leaving only raw vulnerability. But it is the final step where the true power of this technique is finally realized. The 7th stage brings a realization so profound that it permanently alters their psychological landscape. It is here that the mind finally snaps, unable to reconcile the void you left behind. It begins with a single jarring realization that everything they knew has fundamentally shifted. The first moment they reach for you and find nothing is where the disorientation begins. This marks stage 1, the shock of non-existence, a jarring crack in their perceived reality. They expected you to be there, not for your value, but as a fixed variable in life. Like the very ground beneath their feet, your presence was something they simply assumed would remain. Humans inherently value the consistency of presence and the absolute reliability of your constant, daily attention. They grow comfortable with the predictability of your emotional availability, treating it as a permanent utility. However, fixed variables in a relationship are rarely respected. They are merely expected by the mind. When that expectation is shattered, a profound sense of disorientation becomes their new and frightening reality. Imagine reaching for a familiar step in the dark, only to find nothing but cold, empty air. This psychological infrastructure depends on the belief that you will always be there to meet their needs. Machiavelli observed that men are dominated by their immediate needs, ignoring the long-term cost of neglect. Their focus is so narrow that they fail to see the person behind the function you provide. This simplicity makes them vulnerable to the strategic absence you are now beginning to master. As Machiavelli wrote, men are so simple of mind that the deceitful always find those ready to be deceived. They deceive themselves into believing your patience was infinite and your presence was a guaranteed law. Now, the sudden void forces a revaluation crisis as they struggle to reconcile your disappearance. What happens when the person who was always a given suddenly transforms into a silent ghost? Their mental map fails because they relied on a consistency they never bothered to truly earn. This is the moment the mirror stage begins, where they must finally see themselves without you. Every message they send into the void is met with the deafening roar of your strategic absence. The intrusive recall of your past kindness now haunts them, highlighting the scale of their loss. They are forced to confront the reality that you were never a variable, but a choice. By removing your attention, you dismantle the psychological infrastructure they built upon your steady reliability. Once the initial shock wears off, the silence begins to speak with a terrifying clarity. It starts asking difficult questions about their own worth that they simply cannot answer alone. When the world goes quiet, their own mind becomes the loudest thing in the room. This marks stage 2 of the collapse, a phenomenon known as the interrogation within. As the clock strikes 2 a.m., the silence shifts into a relentless internal trial. In this mental courtroom, the person acts as both the fierce prosecutor and the defendant. Intrusive recall begins to flood their thoughts, replaying every shared moment with haunting clarity. Your strategic absence has removed the fixed variable they once relied upon for emotional stability. Now, they start asking difficult questions about their own worth that they cannot answer alone. Did I do enough to keep them? Or was I always destined to be forgotten? To understand this descent, we must look to Machiavelli's sharp observations on social power. Machiavelli noted that a ruler's intelligence is often estimated by the quality of men around them. Without you there, their mirror stage begins to crack under the weight of sudden isolation. The psychological infrastructure they built around your presence is now collapsing into a dark void. This collapse triggers a revaluation crisis, forcing them to confront a reality without your light. The interrogation continues, a cycle of blame and regret that offers no path to acquittal. They wonder if the last words they spoke were the catalyst for this crushing silence. Was I the reason they left, or did I simply stop mattering to them? The mind is a courtroom where the jury of memory never reaches a final verdict. This late-night trial feels claustrophobic, trapping them within the walls of their own insecurity. Every memory is examined under the harsh, unyielding light of their own growing self-doubt. Their identity, once anchored by your presence, is now drifting in an ocean of uncertainty. The prosecutor demands to know why they failed to see the warning signs of your departure, while the defendant searches for excuses that no longer hold any weight in the silence. If their worth is tied to those around them, your absence leaves a hollow core. The strategic void you created has become a mirror they are finally forced to face. As dawn approaches, the exhaustion of the internal interrogation leaves them desperate for resolution. But internal questions aren't enough. Eventually, the mind needs external proof to find peace. The external world offers endless distractions, but the night strips away every shield from the truth. As silence settles, the psychological infrastructure of a relationship begins to crumble under its own weight. When the clock strikes 2 in the morning, the real interrogation begins within their restless mind. The absence of noise allows a sharp, intrusive recall to penetrate their once guarded emotional defenses. During these hollow hours, they realize you are no longer a fixed variable in their daily life. The strategic absence you've maintained forces them into a sudden and painful revaluation crisis. They sit in the dark, staring into a mirror stage where they must face their own failures. Within this mental courtroom, their mind assumes 2 roles that are destined to clash violently. The prosecutor emerges first, cold and relentless, demanding answers for why you are finally gone. Then comes the defendant, desperate and broken, trying to justify the neglect they showed you. This internal war reflects the Machiavellian principle that power shifts when you stop speaking. Every memory becomes a piece of evidence used against them in the cold silence of night. They search for a reason to blame you, but they only find the void you left behind. The 2 o'clock a.m. hour is the ultimate judge, stripping away the lies they told themselves. Without your presence to ground them, their ego begins to unravel in the absolute stillness. They realize that by vanishing, you have gained a psychological leverage they can no longer ignore. The prosecutor demands to know why they didn't value you when you were still there. The defendant offers no excuses, only the crushing weight of a silence they didn't anticipate. This is the moment where strategic absence transforms from a simple distance into a dominant power. In the quiet, the mind cannot escape the haunting questions that only arrive after midnight. It is a fundamental law of psychology. The human brain cannot tolerate an incomplete loop. This brings us to stage 3, the desperate, driving hunger for a final resolution. When a story begins, the human mind demands to see the final chapter written. Have you ever noticed how an unfinished story is the only one you can't stop thinking about? Every silence is a question, and the brain instinctively hungers for a clear, definitive answer. In the architecture of emotional collapse, this vacuum of information creates a haunting psychological obsession. Much like a song that cuts off right before the final note, your absence creates tension. This tension becomes a mental hook, pulling them back into your orbit through pure cognitive necessity. When the mind cannot find peace inside, it begins a frantic external search for any clue. They find themselves obsessively scrolling through social media, looking for a sign of your life. Every old message is scrutinized and analyzed as they hunt for the hidden reason behind the silence. They reach out to mutual contacts, hoping to find the missing piece of this fractured puzzle. Every unanswered question about your sudden disappearance becomes a sharp hook embedded deep within their mind. Why does a ghost often feel more present than a person standing right in front of you? The mystery of your strategic absence transforms you into a fixed variable they simply cannot ignore. Their psychological infrastructure begins to buckle under the weight of this unresolved narrative loop. Machiavelli once wrote that the wise man does at once what the fool does finally. In this revaluation crisis, they finally realize the value of what they have so carelessly lost. Their sudden urgency is a mirror stage reflection of the power you now hold over them. By doing nothing, you force them to do everything just to close the open loop. But when this exhaustive search reveals nothing, their mind begins to manufacture its own dark theories. The silence stops being a void and starts becoming a canvas for their deepest, most intrusive recall. In stage 4, the ego enters survival mode, initiating a desperate process known as mythmaking. To keep from breaking under the pressure, the mind begins to create a protective lie. This stage is where they start constructing stories to explain your cold and strategic absence. Faced with an unexplainable void, the mind must invent a narrative to protect its self-image. They cannot accept their own failures, so they transform themselves into the victim instead. Every detail of the past is rewritten to shield their ego from the pain of neglect. As Niccolò Machiavelli observed, most men will always judge more by their eyes than hands. They look at the surface of your silence and create a version they can easily tolerate. Machiavelli noted that while everyone can see the mask, very few can actually feel reality. Their psychological infrastructure begins building a dam of sand to hold back a sea of regret. However, these psychological myths are inherently unstable and require a massive amount of internal energy. Maintaining a false reality is an exhausting task that drains their remaining emotional reserves. The ego works overtime to ensure the mirror stage doesn't reveal their own deep failures. Can a lie truly protect someone from the echoing void left by your strategic absence? Every hour spent in this myth-making stage is another hour spent avoiding the crushing truth. They choose the fiction of being wronged over the reality of having been completely replaced. Because these narratives are fragile, they require constant maintenance to prevent a total collapse. The mind becomes a battlefield where the ego fights a losing war against the silence. Your absence acts as a fixed variable that their desperate imagination simply cannot solve. Eventually, the weight of the myth becomes too heavy for their crumbling psychological infrastructure. But myths are fragile, and soon, the memories themselves begin to haunt their every thought. The myth can only hold for so long before the stage 5 phantom presence finally arrives. This is the moment they realize that despite your physical absence, you are everywhere in their mind. Your strategic absence has carved a deep void, and now that vacuum desperately demands to be filled. They try to move forward, but the psychological infrastructure you once shared begins to haunt their silence. Suddenly, they experience intrusive recall, a psychological phenomenon where your memory is summoned without their consent. It strikes during a quiet morning coffee or in the middle of a crowded, noisy city street. How do you run from someone who lives inside your own thoughts, anchored to every single corner? Like a phantom limb that still itches long after it is gone, your presence lingers within them. Every song on the radio or scent in the air triggers an involuntary flash of your face. The brain struggles to bridge the gap between your previous existence and this new, haunting silence. Their mind becomes a mirror stage, reflecting the image of what they lost at every single turn. Intrusive recall ensures that the withdrawal they feel is not just physical, but deeply, painfully mental. They realize that by choosing to vanish, you have actually become more present than ever before. This internal haunting is the ultimate cost of failing to value the person who was once there. The harder they try to push you away, the more the vacuum pulls your memory back in. It is a relentless loop of mental imagery that they can neither control nor easily escape from. Their ego's mythmaking collapses under the weight of these vivid, uninvited flashes of your shared past. Each memory serves as a silent witness to the value they ignored until you were finally gone. Now the silence is no longer empty. It is filled with the echoes of your phantom presence. Every thought of you is a ghost that refuses to be exorcised from their internal landscape. They begin to wonder if the version of you they dismissed was actually their greatest anchor. Every room in their house feels smaller as the memory of your presence expands within it. This is the architecture of emotional collapse, where the mind rebuilds what the heart tried to discard. The phenomenon of intrusive recall turns their own cognitive functions into a gallery of your absence. Once they can't escape your memory, they are forced to re-evaluate your actual price. In stage 6, the bill finally comes due for every moment they took you for granted. They used to think you were cheap, but now they realize you were truly priceless all along. This is the revaluation crisis, where the ego's internal economy finally admits it made a fatal error. Every person operates on an unconscious ledger that tracks the hidden value of those in their lives. It is the sudden, gut-wrenching realization of selling a winning lottery ticket for just a handful of change. Neglect is the slow and invisible killer, ending connections without a single drop of blood ever spilled. This silent force erodes the psychological infrastructure until the entire foundation of the relationship turns to dust. What is the true cost of a person you realize you can never actually replace? Revaluation demands a painful admission of error that the ego has spent weeks trying to desperately avoid. Machiavelli observed that people rarely recognize their mistakes until it is far too late to correct them. The internal economy of their mind is crashing as the debt of your absence becomes completely undeniable. They ignored the signals of your worth, blinded by the arrogant belief that you were a fixed variable. Now the mirror stage begins, forcing them to look at the version of themselves that lost you. They are standing in an empty room, finally understanding the value of what used to fill the space. Your strategic absence has turned their comfort into a haunting reminder of everything they let slip away. Why do we only understand the true value of a thing when the shelf is finally empty? The ego can no longer hide behind myths when the reality of your worth hits like stone. Intrusive recall floods their mind with every memory of the neglect they once thought was completely harmless. They realized that while they were busy looking elsewhere, the slow killer of neglect was finishing its work. As Machiavelli warned, the realization of a fatal mistake often arrives only when the damage is permanent. The unconscious ledger is being rewritten in ink that burns, correcting the price of your lost presence. But there is one final stage ahead, the one that leaves absolutely no room for escape or denial. Beyond their internal collapse lies a realization that changes how you view every single relationship you hold. Every person operates on an internal economy, an unconscious ledger tracking the true value of those around them. Within this invisible market, you have likely been underpricing yourself for far too long to keep others comfortable. You have allowed yourself to become a fixed variable, a constant they never feared losing until this moment. Think of those who treat your presence as a default rather than a hard-earned privilege in their life. Their psychological infrastructure was built on the assumption that your emotional investment would never truly run dry. By implementing a strategic absence, you force a sudden and necessary audit of your worth within their world. Reclaiming ownership of your emotional economy starts when you stop offering discounts to those who ignore your value. When you disappear, you disrupt their sense of security and force them to face the mirror stage alone. This is not merely about revenge. It is about rewriting the terms of your own internal trade agreement. Consider the people who only reach out when their own emotional reserves have finally hit rock bottom. You are not a safety net. You are the high-value currency that keeps their entire world from collapsing. If they cannot see your worth in your presence, they must learn to feel it through your absence. Machiavelli understood that power shifts when the one who was once predictable suddenly becomes a total mystery. This revaluation crisis forces them to confront the massive debt they have accumulated through years of your kindness. Your intrusive recall in their mind becomes a constant reminder of the high price they refuse to pay. Take a moment to audit your ledger and identify who has been taking more than they ever gave. Determining your own price point ensures that no one can ever treat your time as a cheap commodity. Every moment you spend away is an investment back into your own self-worth and sovereign emotional territory. Stop being the bargain they can always afford and start being the luxury they cannot live without. This shift in perspective transforms you from a passive participant into the master of your own social destiny. Assessing your emotional economy is the first step toward building a life defined by mutual respect and balance. If they cannot meet your new valuation, they no longer deserve a seat at your table of influence. Reclaiming your power means being willing to walk away when the ledger consistently shows a devastating loss. You are finally taking control of the market, ensuring your presence is valued at the highest possible level. Before we reach the final stage, you must understand why you should never look back at them. People beg for closure, but here is the cold truth. Closure is just permission to finally forget. By definition, closure provides the psychological release necessary for the human brain to move on and heal. It is the final signature on a contract that allows both parties to walk away clean. However, when no closure is offered, your image becomes an unforgettable ghost within their fractured mind. This is the hidden power of strategic absence, turning your silence into a permanent psychological fixture. Why would you ever give them the key to escape the mental prison they built themselves? Think of closure as a healing scab, while your silence remains a wound that refuses to close. Machiavelli understood that maintaining an air of mystery is far more effective than providing a tidy explanation. You shift from a person they once knew into a fixed variable they can never quite solve. Your absence begins to dismantle their psychological infrastructure, leaving them searching for answers that will never come. This lack of resolution triggers intrusive recall, forcing them to replay your final moments on a loop. They enter a revaluation crisis, questioning every word and look because they lack a definitive ending. To withhold closure is to retain your power, ensuring your value remains at its absolute peak. Without your validation, they are forced into the mirror stage, left alone with their own reflection. You are no longer a memory to be archived, but a riddle that demands their constant attention. Every unanswered text and unreturned call becomes a brick in the wall of their growing obsession. While they search for an exit, you are already walking toward a future where they no longer matter. The silence you leave behind is not a void, but a heavy, echoing presence in their life. By staying silent, you force them to realize that their closure was never yours to give. Most believe that talking brings peace, but silence is the true architect of a lasting legacy. Denying them that final conversation ensures your presence lingers long after you have physically departed. And that haunting lack of closure leads them directly to the mirror for a painful final confrontation. Everything is built to this moment, the ultimate psychological endgame where the truth becomes completely unavoidable. Stage 7 represents the mirror that doesn't lie, where the reflection finally strips away every desperate excuse. After the revaluation crisis has passed, the target enters a phase of brutal and inescapable self-reflection. In this space, the psychological infrastructure they built to protect their ego finally begins to crumble. The focus shifts dramatically from your absence to the chilling pattern of their own repeated failures. They stop asking where you went and start wondering why everyone eventually leaves them behind. The haunting realization settles in that you were just one of many who found them lacking. Your strategic absence has successfully turned their focus inward, creating a permanent and painful mental scar. They begin to see themselves as the fixed variable in a long equation of abandoned relationships. What do you do when the common denominator in every failure is actually you? Machiavelli warned that those who cling to professions of virtue often find their own total destruction. He wrote that a man who wishes to act virtuous meets ruin amongst so much evil. Their performative goodness is no match for the dark reality of how they treated your heart. Every memory of your worth becomes a jagged piece of glass in the mirror they now hold. In this mirror stage, the image they see is a stranger who sabotages their own happiness. This realization is often the blow that breaks their spirit permanently, leaving no room for recovery. The crisis is no longer about losing you, but about the terrifying void within their own soul. Can they ever recover from seeing the ghost of everyone they have ever neglected? Silence becomes their constant companion as they realize the common denominator in every loss is them. You have orchestrated a masterclass in human psychology without ever raising your voice or fighting. By withholding closure, you force them into a confrontation they were never prepared to win. They will remember you not as a victim, but as the one who finally held the mirror. The architecture of their emotional world has collapsed, leaving only the cold truth of their nature. When you reach this point, you have moved beyond revenge and have finally become a legend. So, what does this mean for you, the person who was once taken for granted? Legends do not explain themselves because true power never needs to justify its own existence. While others scream for validation, you choose the silent path that demands a total respect. Direct confrontation often backfires, giving them the perfect chance to dismiss your concerns entirely. It offers them an easy platform to explain away their neglect with hollow, empty excuses. Instead of providing that escape, you must leave their questions hanging in the heavy air. Machiavelli taught that true mastery lies in cold strategy, rather than impulsive, loud aggression. Aggression is the weapon of the weak, while strategy is the tool of the architect. His philosophy rests on the axis that whoever controls perception ultimately controls our shared reality. When you control how they perceive your absence, you dictate the reality of your worth. By disappearing from those who undervalued you, you reclaim total ownership of your emotional economy. You stop spending your energy on someone who treats your presence like a cheap commodity. You are the architect now, and silence has become the blueprint for your new empire. Will you fight for a seat where you are unwanted, or will you build your own? Why demand a voice in their world when you can be the ruler of yours? This is how you transform from a discarded memory into a haunting and legendary presence. Reclaiming your economy means recognizing that your attention is the most valuable currency you possess. Your growth is no longer dependent on their recognition, but on your own strategic distance. Strategic absence is the ultimate mirror, reflecting their loss while you build a better future. You have moved beyond the need for revenge and stepped into the power of legend. But the journey into the complex architecture of the human mind does not end here. The path to mastery is only for the few who are brave enough to seek it. Some dimensions of the human mind are simply too dangerous for a public social media feed. To truly unlock the hidden architectures of power, you must be willing to go much deeper. What you have seen today is merely the lobby of a much larger psychological fortress. The join button serves as your exclusive key to the restricted vault of hidden knowledge. Within this community, we explore restricted content and complex dimensions of advanced psychological architecture. This is where we strip away surface-level advice to reveal the raw mechanics of influence. Are you ready to finally see the rest of the map and master your emotional economy? Beyond this point, the truths become sharper and the strategies become even more potent for you. Your journey into the deepest layers of strategic absence is waiting just on the other side. Enter the inner circle today and claim your place among those who truly understand human nature. The architecture of silence is just the beginning of what awaits you in our private community. Secure your access now to ensure you never miss the most critical lessons in psychological warfare. Leave the masses behind and step into a world where power is calculated with absolute precision. We are building a legacy of strength that the average person will never even begin to comprehend. Do not settle for the crumbs of knowledge when the entire feast is within your reach. Click the link below to join us and redefine the way you interact with the world. The vault is opening, but only for those who recognize the true value of this intelligence. It is time to graduate from the public feed and master the dark arts of psychology. I will see you on the inside, where the real work of transformation finally begins.